Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be unraveling the fascinating history of how humans and plants have interacted over time.
Yeah, it's a story that goes way beyond simply admiring their beauty. It's more about understanding how truly integral they've been to our very existence.
Right. Okay, so let's try to unpack this.
Hmm.
Imagine we're not just like flipping through a textbook,
Yeah.
but we're having a lively discussion about all the amazing things plants do and how we've learned to use them for food, medicine, and so much more.
Absolutely. One of the most interesting aspects is the idea of practical knowledge of plants.
Okay?
This knowledge has been passed down for generations, especially in hunter-gatherer societies,
Yeah.
where it's about looking at a plant and instinctively knowing, what is this good for?
So instead of just getting lost in how they look, they focused on practicality. Like, how could these plants help them to survive and thrive? It's almost like a real-life encyclopedia built up over centuries of just experience.
Precisely. And here's something interesting. Even the way language is developed reflects this focus.
Oh.
Plants without a known use might not even have specific names, you know? So it shows how our relationship with nature shapes our culture and language in some pretty profound ways.
That is a fantastic point. It
Yeah.
really shows how central plants were to their way of life. So how did this knowledge evolve as societies became more complex?
Well, let's take a look at ancient Egypt around 2500 BCE.
Okay.
They were masters of agriculture and preservation, developing really intricate techniques for cultivating crops and creating plant-based products for all sorts of uses, even mummification.
Wow, so they were still very focused on the how of plants, like how to utilize them for practical benefit.
Yes, but then things shift a bit with the ancient Greeks, thinkers like Aristotle.
Yeah.
They start asking why about plants going beyond just their usefulness and exploring their structure, their life cycles, their fundamental nature.
So that's where we see the start of botany as a science. Humanity's curiosity about the natural world starts to blossom alongside those very plants.
Exactly. And that curiosity only grows during the Age of Exploration. From the 15th to the 17th centuries, ships return from voyages just laden with exotic plants. Never before seen plants.
It must have been like discovering a treasure trove of botanical wonders.
It really was, and it sparked this frenzy of cataloging and classifying, driven by questions of what and where. Botanists were eager to identify and locate these new species,
Yeah.
expanding our knowledge of the plant kingdom.
So still a focus on practical applications, but with that sense of wonder and scientific inquiry.
Absolutely. And then around 1800, something truly groundbreaking happens that changes botany forever. Advancements in microscope technology.
Now this is where things get really exciting.
Right. For the first time, botanists can peer into the inner workings of plants. It was like gaining a whole new perspective on them, revealing structures and processes we never knew existed before.
I can only imagine the awe they must have felt. It's like unlocking a secret code within the plants themselves.
Exactly. And this new perspective leads to a resurgence of those why questions. Scientists were driven to understand how photosynthesis worked, how plants transported water and nutrients, how they reproduced. It was a revolution in botanical understanding.
So we've seen this amazing evolution from practical knowledge to scientific exploration in our relationship with plants.
We have. And what's really remarkable is that after centuries of scientific exploration, there's this renewed interest in the practical uses of plants, particularly in searching for new medicines from rainforest species.
It's like we've come full circle back to those early societies who relied on plants for healing.
Exactly. We're tapping into this huge repository of plant knowledge that's been accumulated over millennia,
Hmm.
blending ancient wisdom with modern scientific techniques.
So it's not just about understanding plants for knowledge, but harnessing their properties to help humanity.
Precisely. And one of the best examples is how we use plant properties that were originally developed for the plant's own survival.
Okay.
Take caffeine, for instance.
Ah, yes. The fuel that keeps many of us going.
Right. But did you know that plants like coffee and tea actually produce caffeine to help them thrive in harsh environments?
Oh, really?
It allows them to conserve energy at night by entering a near-dormant state, withstand temperature fluctuations, and then it gives them that boost in the morning.
That's so cool. So we're benefiting from a plant's survival mechanism.
And exactly. And it goes beyond just caffeine. Think about cotton.
Oh, yeah, a staple for clothing.
Yeah.
But why would a plant need cotton?
Well, the fibers that we use to make cotton fabric actually provide structural support for the plant.
Oh, wow. So we're sort of wearing a plant skeleton.
You could say that. And another prime example is sucrose, the sugar we use. Plants create sucrose to store energy.
So we're tapping into a plant's energy reserves to sweeten our lives.
Precisely. It highlights how we've cleverly learned to utilize the solutions plants have developed for their own survival to meet our needs.
It really speaks to the ingenuity of both plants and humans. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about nutrition. Let's picture ourselves back in the age of exploration, on a ship sailing for months on end.
I can't imagine the food was very exciting back then.
No, not exactly. Sailors often suffered from scurvy, which is a really debilitating disease caused by a lack of vitamin C.
Ah, yes, a classic example of how understanding plant properties can be crucial for human health. Captain James Cook, known for his epic voyages, he recognized this importance.
Didn't he take some steps to prevent scurvy among his crew?
He did. Unlike other ships that relied on preserved food, Cook made sure his crew had access to fresh watercress. He essentially had a mini garden on board.
What a simple yet brilliant solution.
Absolutely. It shows how crucial it is to understand which plants contain essential nutrients, and it ties back to that concept of practical knowledge we talked about earlier.
Right, because while scurvy was a major problem, it wasn't until much later that we actually understood the role of vitamin C.
Exactly. For a long time, it was simply observed that certain plants, like watercress, prevented this disease.
That's fascinating.
Hmm.
And speaking of vitamin C, isn't it interesting that humans actually need to get it from our diet?
It is. Most animals can produce vitamin C on their own, but humans, along with some other primates, lost that ability during our evolution.
Wow. So we rely on plants to provide us with this essential nutrient.
Mm.
It really highlights how interconnected our lives are with the plant kingdom.
Absolutely. It really underscores how much we depend on plants for our health and well-being. Yeah, it really underscores that connection. So we've gone from ancient wisdom to modern science, and it shows just how intertwined our lives are with plants.
It's amazing how something as simple as a plant can have so much history and knowledge, even solutions to human problems.
It really is, and it makes you think about how much we can still learn from just observing and understanding nature.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Speaking of learning from plants, you mentioned a resurgence of interest in the practical knowledge of plants, especially in things like traditional medicine and sustainable living.
Yeah, there's a growing recognition that indigenous cultures hold a wealth of knowledge about plants that has been built up over generations. And this knowledge, which is based on such deep observation and understanding of the natural world, can offer really valuable insights for modern society.
It's like we're tapping into a hidden library of wisdom that's been there all along.
Exactly. It just highlights how important it is to respect and preserve traditional knowledge, not just for its cultural value, but also for its potential to help us with contemporary issues.
So we're coming full circle in a way, embracing the practical uses of plants while still integrating all the scientific understanding we've gained over the centuries.
Precisely. It's about bridging that gap between ancient wisdom and modern science.
So when we talk about this practical knowledge, what are we really talking about? What kind of things do these cultures know about plants?
Well, for instance, they had an incredible understanding of edible and medicinal plants. They knew which plants could be used for dyes and fibers, which ones were poisonous, even how to prepare plants for different uses.
That's amazing. It's like they had a whole encyclopedia of plant knowledge just stored up there.
They did. And a lot of this knowledge was passed down through generations, through stories, songs, practical demonstrations.
It makes you realize how much can be lost when those traditions aren't carried on.
You're right, and that's why it's so crucial to document and preserve this knowledge before it disappears.
So we've talked about this practical knowledge, but how does that translate to modern applications? How are we actually using it today?
Well, one area that's getting a lot of attention is ethnobotany, the study of how different cultures use plants. This field is helping us to rediscover and understand those traditional plant uses and to explore their potential in modern contexts.
So we're looking to the past to inform our future.
In a sense, yes. We're recognizing that traditional knowledge can offer valuable solutions to some of the challenges we face today.
Can you give me some specific examples of how it's being used?
Sure, one area is in the development of new medicines. Lots of pharmaceutical companies are looking at traditional plant remedies as a source of inspiration for new drugs.
That makes sense. Plants have been used for medicinal purposes for centuries, right?
Exactly. And there's a growing amount of scientific evidence to back up the effectiveness of many traditional plant-based remedies.
So it's not just folklore, it's actually grounded in science.
Precisely. Another area where we're seeing it applied is sustainable agriculture.
Yeah, I can see how understanding traditional farming practices could be beneficial.
Absolutely. Many indigenous cultures have developed techniques for growing food sustainably, without harming the environment.
Right.
And those techniques are now being studied and adapted for modern agriculture.
It's about learning from the past to build a better future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that traditional knowledge can teach us how to live in harmony with nature.
That's really inspiring. We've just scratched the surface of what we can learn from plants.
We have, and I think as we continue to explore and understand the plant world, we'll uncover even more fascinating insights and applications.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's clear that plants are not just passive things, they're active participants in our lives, shaping our history, our culture, our future.
They are, and I hope this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for this incredible world of plants.
Yeah, it makes you think about just how deep that connection really is. It's a relationship that goes back thousands of years, and it affects every part of our lives.
It really does.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up, I think it's good to remember a few key things. We started by talking about practical knowledge, how for so long humans have depended on plants to survive and thrive.
Right. We saw how it wasn't just knowing what to eat, but also about medicine, building, even how cultures develop.
Exactly. It was this whole understanding of plants and their place in the world.
And then how botany as a science added a whole new layer. We started looking deeper inside plants, at their biology, their chemistry, all their amazing adaptations.
But even with all that science, there's this comeback of interest in traditional knowledge about plants. Like we're realizing we can still learn a lot from the wisdom of the past.
It's like coming full circle, combining that old wisdom with modern science to get a better picture of the plant world.
Precisely. And that's leading to some really cool stuff happening in medicine, farming, sustainable living.
It's exciting to think about what we might discover as we keep exploring.
It is. And to finish up, I'd like to leave you with a question to think about. If plants have found such clever ways to survive, what can we learn from them? How can we use that knowledge to create a better future for ourselves and for the planet?
That is a great question to think about. And with that, we'll wrap up our exploration of the amazing world of plants. Thanks for joining us, and keep on